Oh, groaned Margaya, not being able to hide his feelings anymore. You probably think all this is bluff, some fantastic nonsense that I'm inventing. Oh, no, I don't feel so for a moment, but only how hard, what a lot of.
Yes, but that is the way it's done. It's so written in the Shastra. You have to do certain things for attaining certain ends.
It is not necessary to question why. It'll be a mere waste of energy and you will get no answer. Well, follow my words carefully.
Take the blackened lotus petal, mix it with ghee, and put a dot of it on your forehead after the prayer, every day, exactly between your eyebrows. Yes, Margaya said weakly. He was feeling more and more in despair of how he was going to fulfill these various injunctions.
Red lotus, grey-skinned cow, and antelope, where am I? What a world this is, it seemed to him an impossible world. How am I to get all these? He groaned within himself.
Have trust in yourself and go ahead. He will show you a way. Did you imagine that riches came to people when they sat back and hummed a tune? A whole day was spent by him in going after the red lotus.
It took him through the northern part of the town, past Alaman Street and the banks of the Saryu. He forded the river at Nallappa's mango grove. A village cart was crossing the river.
The man driving it recognized him and shouted, "Oh, Margaya." He jumped out of the cart, sending up a great splash of water, which struck Margaya in the eyes and face. It also cooled his brow after the exertion of the day. The villager was an old client of his.
He said, "What has come over you, sir, that we don't see you? Without you, we are finding it so difficult. You can't expect me to be at your beck and call all the time."
I have other things to do. But you cannot just abandon us. I have other business to look after, my dear fellow.
Don't imagine this is my only task. I used to do it more as a sort of help to my fellow men. They were both standing knee-deep in water.
Margaya said, "Let me ride with you up to the branch road." The villager was only too eager to take him and asked his son, who was in the cart, to get down and walk so as to make room for Margaya. He asked, "So far out?"
"May I know why you are going this way?" Margaya said, "You must never ask why or where when a person is starting out. That'll always have an adverse influence." He felt he was beginning to talk like the temple priest.
"All right, sir," the villager said obediently. "We have to learn all these things from learned people. Otherwise, how can we know?"
The wheels crunched, roared, and bumped along. Margaya wondered if he was expected to reach his lotus by walking and not by riding in a cart. Would that in any way affect the issues, and would it violate the injunction laid by the priest?
"I don't think there is anything wrong in it. He'd have mentioned it. Anyway, better not raise the question."
Perhaps this cart was sent here by God. He got off at the crossroads, and waited till the cart disappeared down the road. He turned to his left, and cut across a field.
The sun was already tilting westward. He looked up and said, "Heaven help me if it gets dark before I discover the lotus. I may not be able to know whether it is red or black or what, and then it'll be fine, having to start the whole business again tomorrow." He cut across the field and walked half a mile, and came upon a garden, hedged off with brambles and thorn.
His legs ached with this unaccustomed tramping, and his feet smarted with the touch of thorns. He passed through the thicket expecting any minute a cobra to dart across and nip at him. This place must be full of them. Supply the entire district with cobras from here. There was a small narrow gap in the hedge, and he passed through it into a large wood, semi-dark with sky-topping trees, mango, margosa, and what-not.
The place looked wild and deserted, and an evening breeze murmured grimly in the boughs above. Down below, fallen leaves were ankle-deep, and he passed through them with his feet sending out a resounding crick-crick. This is just where cobras live, under a blanket of dry leaves. Here flower gardens had gone wild. All kinds of creepers, jasmine bushes and nerium growing 10 feet high, were intertwined and mixed up.
Some fool has let all this go to waste, he reflected. In fruit alone one might make 10,000 rupees out of this soil. He arrived at the pond.
Its greenish water had a layer of moss, occasional ripples were thrown out by warts or some other darting water creature, and mosquito larvae agitated the surface here and there. Margaya felt very lonely. The steps of the pond were broken and slippery. Half the bank on his side had fallen into the pond.
On the other side there was a small mandap, its walls covered with cobweb and smoke. 3 blackened stones in a corner indicated that some wayfarers had sojourned and lighted a fire here. It might be last year or a century ago. In the middle of the pond there were lotus flowers, red as the rising sun.
They were half closing their petals. They know better than we do that it's nearing sunset, Margaya reflected. He stood on the somewhat slippery step thinking of how to reach the lotus.
He'd have to wade through the greenish water. He stood ankle deep in it and wondered if he had better take off his clothes and go in. If this dhoti gets dirty, it will not merely be dirty but it'll acquire a permanent green dye, I suppose.
And it'll be difficult to go back home wearing it. People might stare and laugh. Better take it off, there's no one about.
He tucked up his dhoti and looked round in order to make sure. If a man lives here, he will not need a square inch of cloth, he reflected. Far in a corner of the little mandap on the other bank he saw someone stirring.
He felt a slight shiver of fear passing through him as he peered closer. Is it a ghost or a maniac? He withdrew a couple of steps and shouted, "Hey, who are you?" vaguely remembering that if it were a ghost it would run away on hearing such a challenge.
But the answer came back. "I'm Dr. Pal, journalist, correspondent and author." Margaya espied a row of white teeth bared in a grin.
"And what are you doing in this lonely place?" "Why not?" came back the voice. It was a hard resonant voice, and there was no doubt that it was of this earth.
"Why not what?" asked Margaya. "Why not here as well as anywhere else?" asked the man, rising and coming out. He was a man of 30 or thereabouts, his face still youthful, with a 3-day stubble on his chin, a lank, tall man, with sunken cheeks, and a crop of hair falling on his forehead and nape.
He wore a pair of blue shorts and a banyan. As he came down the steps, Margaya pointed at the lotus and said, "Get it for me." "You are wearing only shorts."
The other nodded, waded through the water and came back with a lotus flower. He gave it to Margaya. Margaya felt overwhelmed with gratitude.
"You are a very good fellow," he said patronizingly. "What are you doing here, all alone in this place?" "Working, of course," the other said.
"Single-handed?" "Yes, it has to be a single-handed job." Margaya looked at the wilderness round them and said, "No wonder the place is as it is, too much for one man."
The other laughed and said, "I have nothing to do with the garden. I'm here because I find it a very quiet place, and there seems to be no one to ask me to get out. Sit down, you will find it a really nice place, though it looks such a forest."
Margaya feebly protested, "I've got to go before it gets dark." "Why?" "I have a long way to go. There may be cobras."
"Not one here. Sit down, sit down." Margaya sat down on the steps. The other sat beside him.
A breeze stirred the leaves and sent a few ripplets rolling and striking against the stone steps. Casvariana trees which loomed over the little mandap murmured. Brilliant sun from the west made the entire garden glitter.
Margaya held the lotus delicately by the stalk and looked at it. "Now and then people come here for lotus," said the other. Margaya wondered if he was going to ask him to pay for it.
He didn't like the idea. Before he should entertain any such notion, just to divert his mind, Margaya asked, "What is your connection with this place?" "The same as yours," he replied promptly.
I said, "I am here because it doesn't seem to bother anyone. I discovered this by a pure fluke. I'm given to cross-country hikes. I have to in my profession."
"What is your profession?" "I'm a journalist. I'm a correspondent for all these districts of a paper called Silver Way published in Madras."
"Tamil paper?" "Yes, of course. It is the most widely circulated paper in Tamil, with an enormous circulation in FMS, Ceylon, and South Africa.
I cover these districts for them, and in my spare time write my own books." "Oh, you write books?" Margaya asked, full of wonder.
Yes, during my spare time, so difficult to find the leisure for it as a correspondent. All day I must knock about courts and offices and meetings on my cycle in search of news. I don't get much time.
"That's why I stay here, where I can work without disturbance." Margaya was greatly impressed. He had always thought very highly of newspaper people.
"How many books have you written?" "4, came the reply, and he added, 3 are here," tapping his forehead. Only one has been got down on paper.
What is it? A story? A story.
Oh, no, something more serious than that. Oh, said Margaya, feeling that he had better not make enquiries in a region where he was a stranger. Books and writing were not for him, he was only a businessman.
Margaya rose to go. It's getting late, he murmured. I will go with you up to the road, said the other and followed him down to the edge of the pond.
Margaya was fascinated by the sight of some more red lotus floating on water, with their petals already closing. He reflected, even if there is a pound of paste to be made, we have enough lotus here, provided I can find the grey cow. His mind started worrying about the next stage of the search.
Where are grey cows to be seen? Perhaps this author and journalist by his side might be able to help. They walked down the grassy path in silence for a while.
Margaya surprised the other with the sudden inquiry, have you seen a smoke-colored cow? Where? The other asked, stopping suddenly.
Anywhere. I mean, do you know where a smoke-colored cow can be seen? Why? Margaya felt embarrassed.
He blinked again. I want its milk, for some special, medicinal purpose. Are you an Ayurvedic doctor or an aphrodisiac maker?
The other asked, looking at him. Trying to make some potent drugs with red lotus and so on. I have seen only Ayurvedic doctors coming here in a search of some herb or leaf or lotus and things like that.
Margaya felt that because he had no ready answer, and no name to give for his avocation in life, the other would give him no useful tip. He covered the entire topic with a loud, prolonged laugh, at the end of which he found the other completing his remark, I suppose the milk must always be white, whatever the color of the cow. Margaya agreed with this remark, laughed afresh, and changed the subject immediately.
What did you say your books were about? Sociology, said the other. Oh, I see, said Margaya, trying to look clever, though completely bewildered by the term.
He felt like asking, what is it? But felt it might be an undignified inquiry. He just nodded his head and remained silent.
The other asked, you know what sociology is, I suppose? He was trapping him unnecessarily. Of course, in a manner, but you know I'm a businessman. We businessmen have not much time for scholarly activities.
Dr. Pal understood the position and said, it's a subject that has been much neglected in our country, particularly in our own vernaculars, in our mother tongue. They've everything in English, but in our mother tongue, no. What should the thousands of persons who know only our language do to learn the subject?
Yes, it is very difficult, Margaya agreed. They had now reached a thatched hut. Come in for a moment and see my home and study, said Dr. Pal.
Margaya protested and said something about its being dark. I will escort you back safely, said the other. Don't worry, there are no cobras here.
He pushed the door open. A mat was spread on the ground with a greasy pillow on it, and away from it stood a small tin trunk with a bottle of ink and a stack of paper on it. A very small bedroom lamp was kept on the trunk.
Dr. Pal pushed away the pillow and said, pray sit down, I have not much furniture to offer, this is all. But this is a nice place. Margaya sat down carefully holding the lotus so as to protect it from being crushed.
The place smelt of straw, which was spread on the floor. I do all my writing here,